Hello again people, it's Jonathan again, also known as PC Genie. Today I'm just doing a quick introduction to armour types. So obviously, as you can see, I'm already kitted up. So I'll go through them and their purposes of course, but also the sorts of scenarios when they come in handy, bit by bit. So I'll probably start from bottom up. So down here of course, as you can see, I've got my greaves on. Now suffice it to say, they're there for lower protection from different strikes. That's worth mentioning that generally the longer the weapon, the more likely you're going to get struck in the legs. So if you have something like a dagger, then of course it's not really that worth reaching all the way out to stab someone in the kneecap or something. You're probably just going to be going for the head, shoulders, that sort of place. Whereas with something like a long spear, you can pretty much expect it to be about 50-50. So hence, the longer the weapon, also that means the better it's going to be to have things like greaves on when against them. So hence with something like a long sword or a spear, you're going to really need those greaves, whereas maybe you get something like a dagger, you're not going to really need them at all, to be honest. Up from there, you get things like, obviously for your torso protection, so you get things like breastplates, or in this case this is actually just some motocross style armour, so for just motorbiking around. You've got various padding and things, good for protecting front, side, also shoulders on the torso. And of course generally for all weapon types pretty much, you're going to get struck around and they're going to be aiming hopefully to get somewhere like the head or the torso to get the more sort of lethal types of strikes. So hence having a good bit of protection on the torso in terms of sturdiness is good, but also bear in mind coverage as well. So if you've got something that's just got a little pectoral plate or something, then you're going to have a lot of exposed areas. It's not going to be quite so good. So even sometimes going for something lighter, like one of these, or even some mail armour as a shirt, is actually going to do better for you because you've got good coverage, including in certain vulnerable spots like the armpits, and same with a gambeson as well. Going up from there, we've also got things like hand armour. Now of course, if you're doing anything like you've got your weapon extended at any time, so pretty much during any strikes or parries, then it's going to be very important that you've got hand armour. And by extension of course, same with arm armour, known as usually vambraces. Now it's worth mentioning that generally speaking, if you've got the choice budget wise between having hand armour and arm armour, I'd recommend the hand armour, because if something's going to happen, like you're going to get struck on the hand or the arm, generally of course your arm's sturdier, thicker bones, more padding from the fat in your arms, and even things like your clothing will generally cover it better. Whereas with your fingers, they're very fragile, so if you get struck with a cut or a blunt force trauma, and that's either a failed parry, and you get hit on the fingers instead, they're going to get broken or severed. Whereas with something like your limbs, it requires a lot of force to do any serious damage or severing, even though it is certainly still very possible. Apart from that, I've got here, which I'll just pop on now, the equivalent of a helmet. Of course, this is something we use in HEMA called a fencing mask, although these ones are generally, compared to sport fencing masks, have got sturdier padding on them and sturdier meshes, so they're less likely to buckle when they get struck. We also see things like this, which are basically back of the head protectors. You even get whole covers that basically keep the whole head covered with additional padding on top of something like a fencing mask. And from here, it's pretty much the most important piece of armour, because apart from the fact that your head on the top and the sides is going to be vulnerable, you've got your brain in there which you really don't want getting damaged for the fact of lethality or causing permanent brain damage of course. Apart from that, you've also got a lot of weaknesses on the front, around the face. So if you get struck somewhere from the front, which on something like a long sword or an arming sword, you're actually going to see quite a lot, even of cuts, so you're going with an extension, rather than action man type moves, you're actually going to get a lot of strikes going to the front of the face, rather than just necessarily on the top and sides of the face. And from there, I see it's an actual bone structural weakness in the face, just even disregarding things like the eye sockets and places like that, which are weaknesses. Just apart from that, you do sometimes get things called gorgets, which protect the neck as well. lots of these fencing masks come naturally with their own equivalent of a gorget, and you can buy extras as well underneath, which of course protect the neck. And bearing in mind, in something like a battle, where they're going to have just steel helmets going to maybe about here, one of the core places to strike, apart from in spots like the eye sockets in the face, one of the most easiest parts to get that's going to be unarmoured is going to be the neck, especially if they are leaning back or recoiling at all. And it's a very exposed spot where you've got lots of veins and arteries to make a quick, bleeding death. And that's why if you're doing anything like HEMA, I'd strongly recommend you do get neck protection. Yes, that's all, guys. So yeah, those are the different parts Armour you'd commonly see on different soldiers, and of course when doing HEMA. And just to final note, if you're thinking of getting into HEMA, the top two things I'd recommend getting right from the start would be the head protection and the hand protection, as well as maybe some like groin protection. But apart from that, most other pieces of armour are going to be somewhat voluntary, depending on what sort of opponent you're against. We're using steel, nylon, wood, and how hard you're going. Okay, and thanks for your time, guys. Cheers.